I'm Kathy C. I'm the director of the Childhood Communication Center, and I'd like to welcome you all here today. We appreciate you coming out on a Friday evening, and I want to make the introductions. I'd like to thank the Richard and Francine Loeb Family Foundation. Their generous donations really make these programs possible. And so we, Lisa Herber, Susan Norton, and I work throughout the year to develop these programs. We're very interested in your input. And so there is a form, an evaluation form that we'd like you to fill out afterwards. You can tell us how you like things, because if you like it a lot, maybe we can do this again. If you have other ideas of things you're interested in hearing about, I'm particularly interested in knowing what our teenagers think and what you guys are interested in hearing about, because we'd like to really do more programs geared towards the young adults, and their parents, have had lots of opportunities. So tonight we have a program called Be the Boss of Your Hearing Loss, and we have the pleasure of having Stephanie Olson here to present and then to run a teen panel. Stephanie is a family consultant at the Bill Daniels Center for Children's Hearing at the Children's Hospital in Colorado. Fortunately for us, she has some connections here in Seattle, and so we're fortunate enough to have her travel from Denver to come do this for us. She presented at our last annual meeting and did such a fabulous job. We thought we have to have her back to do this, really specifically focused on our youngsters. So Stephanie is incredibly qualified. She'll tell you a little bit about herself, but I'll just go over some of her official roles at Children's Hospital in Colorado. She actually has this very unique role where she serves as a liaison between kids and the medical system. And so she kind of hangs out at the hospital and makes sure that kids are kind of connected and understand what's going on and feel comfortable with things. And it's a fabulous role. She's also worked in the Colorado Home Intervention Program, the Early Intervention Program. She's been a deaf and hard of hearing guide and serves on the board of the Colorado Hands and Voices. So I'll let Stephanie tell you more about herself and turn over the podium to you.
Just 1 second. Where's the I need oh, I found it. Here we go. Let me see. He said if I just click F5, it should come on. I'm looking for my
AV guy.
PowerPoint. I thought it was on right after yours. We're going to look for the PowerPoint. Okay, now go to F. That should work. Oh, go down here. We found it. Maybe click out it. Oh, I see. We'll go to the I don't mind presenting, but this part is the one that I always like, slideshow. Here we go. Thank you. It's so good to be here. The weather is incredible. I'm just loving it. We have snow and rain coming this weekend in Colorado, so I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. We're going to talk a little bit about adolescents or teens, young people. And just to get started, the one thing to keep in mind when we go through these teen years, whether you're doing that right now or whether you're the parent of a teen or a professional working with teens, is to keep in mind that every single person goes through that part of life. And if you look around the room and think about your parents, or even like take a look at Dr. C, you have to remember that she was a teenager one time. And I think it would be fun to see some of the people that are involved in our lives, like what they looked like when they were teens, or maybe hear some of their stories. So maybe someday they'll be on a panel and we can ask them what it's like. The biggest thing we're looking for is that independence and freedom, and trying to figure out what we're going to do in this world, what our role is in society, because we know how we are as a kid at home, but like when you start to get out there and do more and more, and especially if you have hearing loss, what is that going to be like? And then for many years, probably since the time that you were identified with hearing loss, your mom and dad or whoever's in your family pretty much took responsibility for making sure that you had your hearing aids on, or that you were getting sign language as much as possible, learning new words, having access to language and communication. Now it's more of your responsibility as a young person. And while everybody goes through that stage of trying to figure out who you are as a teenager, those of us with hearing loss, we have that other part of our identity that we're trying to figure out. So some of us sometimes take a look at, I have been using my voice and technology. This might be the time that I want to learn sign language. Or some of our young people that have grown up using sign language sometimes want to take a look at technology. And it might not be technology for you specifically, but they might be looking at the technology that we have here this evening. This is an incredible opportunity. We have interpreters, we have the cart, and that's another phenomenal technology that really does enhance our lives. And for kids with hearing loss, sometimes we see that as a limitation, and it's not. But sometimes we feel like we can't always do everything or be who we need to be because of our hearing loss. And there's a couple of nice things that we can do to help with that. And one is becoming the boss of your hearing loss. Having the opportunity to meet other deaf and hard of hearing people also has a big impact. So, like I said, everybody gets to become a teenager, and these are my 3 kids. And what's so interesting to me is that, you know how cute they are when they're little? Look at that. They're just adorable. And then all of a sudden, you get these big people in your house. And you look at that picture of when they're so cute and adorable, and you think, what happened? There's one, the one on the end, my son Andy, he's the middle kid. He has long hair down to here. And he had that cute little haircut when he was little. So they grow and they have a lot of decisions and input on what they're going to do with their life, including their hair. My only requirement for that long hair was that he had to keep it clean and he had to smile and look happy. So whenever, because I didn't want him to be one of those kids with long hair that walked around looking really grumpy. So whenever he did get grumpy, I would just look at him and smile, and then he would go. So the oldest is in the middle. Well, back up a little bit. Andy goes to college in Durango, Fort Lewis, in Colorado. The oldest is in the middle. He graduated from University of Puget Sound, so I'm going to see him this weekend. And then my youngest is a sophomore at Seattle University, and I had lunch with her today, and I'll see her this weekend. One of my biggest requirements every Christmas as a mother is I beg my kids, please, can't we just have one good photo, one nice family photo? And it's never happened. Here they are, they're always goofing around. Like, I'll say, come on, you guys, just smile. And they're like, what? What are we doing? So anyways, teenagers, and they turn out to be lovely people eventually. It takes a little bit of time, but they're going to get there. I have confidence. Here's a photo, a cartoon of the teen brain, and I love it because it is so much fun to see what's going on inside your head. And we'll have to see if some of you agree or disagree with this. But obviously, the biggest part of our brain, the frontal lobe, is really starting to think about relationships and people. And then if you look, let me see if I can get, way over there, that little teeny tiny part in the back of the brain is peer pressure resistance, when people want you to do really dumb things and then you go along with them. I like this part. All the answers. And another favorite thing, slam the door reflex. Is it? Yes? Oh my gosh, some of you are nodding heads. Does anybody slam the door when they get mad or grumpy? Yes? Watch out, because I have a friend who got so tired of her kids doing that, she went in and she took the door off, and they didn't have a door for a while. Yeah, so be careful. Moms and dads, pretend you did not hear that, but just be careful, guys. You don't want to slam that door too much. And then this middle part here, the center of the universe, because we really do believe as young people that it's all about us. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't people be interested in us? We're great people. And then, of course, there's love for parents, and then when they just irritate you, disdain for parents. Very tiny little part of the brain over there is called the judgment gland. Whether you make good decisions and you're judging. And the interesting thing about this brain is, do any of you young people know when this brain becomes an adult brain? Do you know how old you are when you finally get that good adult brain? Hopefully. How old do you think you might be? Somebody know? Did I hear 23, 24, 24? Close, 25, they say, is when you finally get that good brain. So if you remember that photo that I showed you of my kids, I'm still waiting. I've got another year or two to go. So we have that nice brain, but what's not in that little picture was the part where we're thinking about our hearing. What we hear, what we don't hear, and who we are. So who are you? How does your hearing fit into your identity, and what do you call yourself? And this is really important, because after parents find out about the baby's hearing loss, we tend to learn from the people around us and find a word that we might be comfortable with. And some of the kids will, might talk about this a little bit later, but deaf or hard of hearing or hearing impaired or you don't hear very good, it's really interesting. But as you start to go through your life, you need to take a look at what you're comfortable with. And then you might have to tell your parents, you know what, I really don't want to be called this when I talk about my hearing loss. The other important thing is, for so many years, for the moms and dads, it's about your hearing loss. From the first time that they find out what your hearing loss is in that audiogram, parents will sometimes say, this is my little baby Stephanie, and she is hearing impaired. And that's what they might say for a long, long, long time. And then all of a sudden one day, as a person, you need to say, you know what, Mom? I usually say that I'm deaf, hard of hearing, because I'm a little bit of everything. And my mom was so surprised when I told her that. And if you are getting comfortable with what you want to be called, or what is your identity as a deaf and hard of hearing young person, tell your parents what you prefer. Tell the people that work with you, the teachers and people in your school. Very important. You need to become the boss of your hearing loss and figure out, when people ask you and you're out in public, why do you talk that way? Or how come you use your hands when you talk? How can you answer those questions? How will you get information that you've missed? Is it going to be with interpreters? Is it going to be with cart and captioning? Are you going to look over at your mom all the time when somebody says something to you in a restaurant and you don't know what they said? Do you look at your mom? Or are you ready to learn to ask the waiter or the server, what did you say? This afternoon, I met a friend of mine, Christine, and a new friend, Liza, for coffee at Starbucks. And if you have been to a coffee shop, they want to know what your name is. And then they call it out when the coffee's ready. And those coffee shops are very, very noisy. They're hard places to hear. And they call out your name and you just kind of wait. So what I do to get that missed information is I usually stand right where they're going to put the coffee, and I just keep watching and waiting, and I watch what their lips are going to say, and I see the name on there. But today I had some fun. And my friend Christine went first, and the coffee person said, the barista said, what is your name? And she said, Christine. And then it was my turn. I ordered the iced tea that I wanted. And they said, and what name do you want on here? And I said, you can put Christine's best friend. Because my plan was, when they called Christine, and I wasn't going to be able to hear, they would call Christine's best friend, and she could pick up my coffee in case I missed it. And I had it right here. I don't know what happened to it. I wanted to show it to you, but it was really another good way. But how are you going to get that information as you start getting older? When are those times going to be difficult? Like I said, that coffee shop and restaurants can be really hard. So how can you figure out what people are saying to you in a noisy situation? Do you pick a good place to sit? That's what I typically do when I walk into a restaurant. And before my family sits down, they let me decide where to sit first. And they don't do that because they're very polite. What they do is they know that I'm trying to figure out the best place to sit where I can see and hear my family well during meals. We talked a little bit about accommodations. What are you going to need to do well? What is going to help you be successful in life? If you need batteries, are you always ready to go with batteries? Or are you waiting for your mom to dig them out of her purse? Or for your dad to pull them out of the glove compartment? But even with that, when I'm fully responsible for my own batteries, it's still hard. Sometimes I've used up all my batteries. I open up my purse and there aren't any left. So you've got to be thinking about that backup plan, because you do not want your mom following you everywhere for the rest of your life with batteries. That is not good. So start figuring out where you can stack those extra batteries. Some people will have their best friend carry batteries for them in case they run out. They've always got that backup. And I love this name tag. Oops, backing up a little bit, the name tag over there. Hello, my name is the boss. That's what we should be putting on our name tags starting now. You need to own your hearing and the parts that are difficult for you. You need to own it. And that is so important, because if you don't own it, somebody else will. I've been doing presentations probably a good 10, 15 years now. And usually when I present to professionals and parents, I have a slide at the beginning with my mom and dad with me as a baby. And I list a lot of different parts about me, that I'm from Colorado. I originally grew up in Minnesota, and I tell a little bit about my family. And the kids that I have now, I already told you about them, and that I was identified with a severe to profound hearing loss when I was about 3 years old, and my mom and dad realized that I wasn't talking. So they took me to the doctor to find out what was wrong, and they were just stunned that it was a hearing loss. No clue. Just, it was really difficult for them. And a lot of that was because at the time when I was a little girl, there weren't a lot of good resources. And so they slowly had to figure out all of the information themselves, with the professionals at that time telling them what they thought my mom and dad should do. So it was a little bit bumpy, a little bit difficult. So I tell a lot about my background and give that information to families and parents and professionals when I'm presenting. But one time my husband looked at it and he said, "You're missing something." He said, "You didn't say anything about the fact that you got a cochlear implant 10 years ago. Why didn't you say that?" And I said, "Well, you know what? Sometimes cochlear implants can be controversial, and there's a lot of strong opinions about cochlear implants." And he says, "Stephanie, that's your story. You need to own it. If you don't own it, somebody else will. Somebody else would tell about your hearing loss and that you have hearing aids or cochlear implant, or why you decided to do that or you didn't. They're going to make those assumptions." So for you, as you're growing up, you need to take that ownership of your choices that you've made or that your parents made, but what you're going to be making for yourself. And if it's sign language, then you own it. And you tell people why that's your preferred language. We need to take another look at getting information during school. A lot of times kids with hearing technology, they don't want to use FM systems. So how are you going to get that information, the same information that your friends are getting? Are you going to use an interpreter? Are you going to get a note taker? You need to be thinking about that, because that technology continues to change and it gets better and better. Even with the FM systems, if you tried an FM system back when you were in 4th grade and you didn't like it, you should try them now. You can always say, hey, this is good, or thank you, or no thank you. Your social skills, how you're going to walk through the hall of high school, or how you're going to walk on campus at college and get that information when people are talking or calling for you. How can you become aware of what's going on around you? Very important. And self-advocacy, going out there and telling people what works for you, what will help you, what will benefit you, what can they do differently. And then your goals. This is a great time to be thinking about what's ahead. Are you going to volunteer? What kind of a job can you get? Are you going to travel the world? It's a wonderful thing to do, to travel all over. I had the opportunity to connect with a woman that is deaf and blind, 22 years old, traveling the world by herself, not with her mom and dad, and not with the group. She's on her own, out there. It's amazing what's out there for you to see. And what are your skills? What can you do well? And you know what? What are those things that you don't do very well? Are you really unorganized? Are you always trying to find your homework? What can you do to do a little bit better with that? What are your goals for life, and what are your goals today? For me, when I was growing up and I was in high school, middle school, high school, the biggest goal I had was just to pass my math class. That was so hard for me. And then if I did pass it, I started thinking about the next class. That's a good thing to do, but take a look at everything that's going to happen in the next few years. Ask other people that you meet, other people with hearing loss or deaf or hard of hearing. You can even ask interpreters and the professionals that work with you, your audiologist, your ENT, your speech pathologist if you work with somebody, your sign language teacher, a school or whatever. How did you decide to become this? How did you decide to go to medical school? Why did you become an audiologist? Even if that's not what you're interested in doing someday, it's so neat to find out how people got there. Because after all, this is a lifelong journey. And as parents, you're trying to figure out, is this a hearing thing that my kid always does, or is it an adolescent thing? And sometimes it's really hard to tell. There are some things that are unique to us as deaf and hard of hearing people in this world. And that's a process, a developmental process, just like other parts of our lives. But some of it is just that plain old teen, young person thing. And I was just trying to think about me in terms of the difference between like something that was a hearing thing or an adolescent thing. I think for me, an adolescent thing was just probably just trying to figure out, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what I was going to do. That really kept me awake at night. Something that might have been more of a deaf thing, or maybe it was a Stephanie thing, a personality thing, is I kind of wondered who was going to marry me or go out on a date with me someday. Was it going to be a hearing person? Was it going to be a deaf person? And I get that question a lot at work, especially with parents with little babies. They're already wondering who their child's going to marry. And it's like, oh my goodness, don't you want to see how they're going to walk and the other funny things that they're going to do first? But parents worry about things that are way far out there. And I tell families and parents, you know what? Your child is going to marry whoever they fall in love with. And it doesn't matter if it's going to be a deaf person or a hard of hearing person or a hearing person. We have to see what's going to happen. The social environment changes a lot. A lot of our teens will become a lot more active socially. Sports, our kids will talk about that later. Performing, theater, and we need to keep figuring out how we can make that become more accessible. One of my favorite things to do is to go to Broadway productions, and usually the last day of a Broadway traveling Broadway play, like when it starts in New York and it starts traveling to the different states, the performance will have it in open caption. And that's a phenomenal way to go to the theater and see every single word that's being said. And then they'll also provide interpreters, and they'll provide audio interpreting for people that also have vision loss. So we want to keep looking at all the different technology that's out there and figure out what you can get comfortable with. And how can you have communication to family events? One of the most difficult things for me growing up was the first time that I went to a funeral was understanding all the vocabulary that was taking place in the funeral. There's a lot of different words, like some people will say we're going to the reviewal or we're going to a wake. And I didn't know that. That isn't common everyday vocabulary. And the same with like weddings or other big family reunions. Can you double check, parents, that your kids know how people are connected to one another? Because kids with typical hearing loss will overhear that. But you might have to take a few minutes out of that family reunion or before you get there and explain that this is maybe your uncle, but it's my brother, or it's my brother-in-law. Those connections are so important for our families. And a big, big phrase that's not allowed in my house. In fact, my kids have a joke that they can get away with maybe cussing or swearing, but they can never get away with saying never mind. Actually, I don't like my kids to swear, but that's what they say. Mom will let us swear, but she won't ever let us say never mind. To me, when I'm asking about a story that's going on at the dinner table and I've missed something, and they'll say, oh, never mind, it's not important, it makes me feel like I don't count. Like maybe their dad, who has typical hearing, it was okay and good for him to hear the whole story, but not me. It's not fair. If that's happening a lot in your family, then let your family know in a really nice way, you know what, I feel really left out, or I feel like I don't matter when you say never mind. You might need to tell your friends that. We talked about taking care of your equipment. This is a good time of life to start to get that sense of time, because when you're studying or writing a paper, it feels like you have to maybe spend hours on that, and it was really only 40 minutes. And then if you're doing a game, or you're on your phone playing a game, and your mom says, you know what, you've been doing that for an hour, you need to stop, that feels like 10 minutes. You need to start to wrap your mind around getting that sense of time. And understand your personality. Are you somebody that's quiet? Are you outgoing? Are you shy? And when can you be shy but confident to ask questions? And if you're really outgoing, when can you stop talking and listen to the other people that are around you and not dominate the conversation? And the characteristics of your personality, all the little things that make you who you are, that you get from your family, that you get from your school, that you get from the coaches that you're with, sports, what can they do to make you the person that you want to be? We'll be working on this the rest of our life, but that's part of what makes life so interesting. When we connect with people, it's important to become aware of their emotions and how they're feeling and how they're reacting, because a lot of emotions may be conveyed through what the person is saying, through their voice. And in sign language, it'll be conveyed through the facial expression. Maybe one eyebrow will go up, and that's something we need to keep practicing. One thing I work on with our little guys that are deaf and hard of hearing, like maybe 7, 8, 9 years old, is to be aware of feelings and emotions beyond happy or sad. Do you understand when somebody's hysterical, what that means? When somebody's disgusted, that's a good one. Very important for our kids to become aware of. If you hear somebody say how they're feeling, that maybe they are, feeling, I'm trying to find one, let's see, maybe enraged, and you don't know what that means, ask. You don't have to say right at that moment, you said you were feeling enraged, I don't understand what that means. You can, but if they're really enraged and angry, they might not have the patience to explain that. So watch and listen and look. And then when you get home, maybe ask somebody or ask a friend, what was going on? And you'll start to become better at looking at people and how they're feeling. It also helps you when you're feeling so mad and you get ready to slam that door again. You might be able to find a good word that will describe what you're feeling. And so we go with the social skills that we've been talking about. Your manners, very important. You get that from your mom and dad probably, or maybe your grandparents or the teachers at school all the time. You need to have better manners. You need to be nicer. And one of the reasons why those of us that have hearing loss might need to work a little bit more at that is we've had people working with us since we were very little. Let's say you identified with the hearing loss when you were 6 months old or maybe even 3 years old. There have been people involved in your life since you were little, working to make sure that you have what you need at the doctor's appointment or at school, or maybe with some of the sports that you do. And you know what? Sometimes you need to say thank you. Maybe you did not want to get up and go to the audiologist one day for your appointment, but when you're finished, even if you did not want to be there, you need to turn around and say thanks. Thanks for helping me. Or maybe if you were working with an interpreter, one of the nicest things to do is just say, hey, thanks for being there. I really appreciate that. These people work to make sure that we can do well. We can work to make sure that we do well by acknowledging the people in our life. Advocating for yourself in good situations and bad situations, even when things are really not going well, that's a really good time to learn to advocate for yourself. And if you can't do it in that moment, how can you do it later so when something happens later on, you know what to do? And I'm also talking about good situations and bad situations when you have friends that want you to do something and you really don't want to do something. And it doesn't have to be something that's a bad thing. Maybe they all want to go to somebody's house and you really don't want to go. Can you advocate for yourself and say, nope, not going to do that today. Gotta head home. I'm done. But thanks anyways, maybe another time. And it's not always about what you need. It's not always about what others can do for you. It feels that way when we have hearing loss, but it's also about what's going to work well. At your house, if you have a whole bunch of family over for Thanksgiving and no one else knows sign language, it isn't everybody's job to make sure you understand everything. You have a job to maybe ask if somebody can help you. Say, Mom, I'm not following anything that they're talking about at the Thanksgiving table, at the dinner table. Can you sit by me? Well, I don't understand what Grandma keeps talking about. Maybe your dad or maybe a cousin can help fill you in. And keep your positive attitude. It's so hard when you're not doing well and it feels like you can't understand anything that anybody's saying. It's really difficult. But if anything happens down the road, it's because you keep trying. So keep that going. Try again to see what you can get. Your everyday life. Can you wake up by yourself or are your parents still waking you up? Do you have the shake-awake alarm clock or the flashing light to get you out of bed? And how can you get some privacy at home? One of the best things about being a young person is going in your room and shutting the door and just being left alone. But how can people get a hold of you if they want to tell you that it's time for dinner? And if you don't want your parents opening the door and walking in, what can you do? Can your mom kind of crack the door open and flick the light on and off? Do you have somebody in your family that's really good, maybe figuring out a system where they can press a buzzer and the light flashes? What can you do so you can have that privacy? Are you good at staying home alone if there's an emergency? If you feel like somebody's outside, how can you get help? You should be talking about that with your family. And the plan for a fire, where to go, how to call 911, and get help with that. Your siblings, if you have brothers or sisters, how can you get along with them? And if for some reason you're someplace and your dad wants your younger brother to keep an eye on you or help you out and you're not comfortable with that, that's a good conversation to have. Can you get yourself from one place to another? For transportation, if you want to drive someday, do you understand all the traffic signs out there and being courteous and having good manners and being respectful and being aware of what's going on? And can you fight the good fight? If you have brothers or sisters or a good friend, can you have a good fight with them without getting so mad? Can you get your point across? Can you tell people what you're thinking? Very important. That's a lifelong skill. I actually kind of like it when I find out that some of our little guys are having arguments and fights with their brothers and sisters, because it's good practice. Drives the parents crazy, but it's good practice if you're a kid in the family. And learning to find out what you missed. What did you say? Because so many times we think something's happening at home, and your mom said that you're going to go to a movie, but before you go to the movie, they have to stop and maybe pick up some things at the grocery store or maybe go to the dry cleaners, and you thought you were going to the movies, and you get so mad, and you say, you said we were going to the movies. And maybe you missed that part about we've got like 3 stops to make before we go to the movie theater. How can you get that information? How can you say to your mom and dad, you said, and can you listen or see when they say, yes, I did say we were going to the movies, and you heard me say that we're going to the movies, but I also said, and find out that information. Incidental learning, these are topics and conversations that come up that we might miss because we weren't looking at somebody, or maybe their friends were having a conversation behind us and we completely missed something new. Maybe a new movie that they're talking about, a new game, a new TV show. How can you find out about those things that are happening? Kind of those pop culture references, the slang words, that people say. So I always use them. When I was a kid, if you were talking about green, it meant the color green. Now when you say somebody's being green, it has nothing to do with the color. It has to do with being recycling and being resourceful and taking care of our environment. Our vocabulary and the words change all the time. If you hear your dad use a new word, or you see somebody laughing about a new funny expression, find out what it is. Ask them about it. And if you're too embarrassed to do it in that moment, ask them later. Say, what were they talking about? They said something about, and see what you can learn. It's so important because those expressions help you tell a story so that when something happens, you can say that they had a TV show on a couple of weeks ago, and it was the Saturday night reruns, all the shows from the last 40 years of Saturday night. And there's a lot of good expressions from that. So older people like your parents or myself, we can say some of those expressions and laugh about them. So there's always one about, I live in a van down by the river. It's not very funny, but if you ever watch Saturday Night Live, it's kind of funny. Or the Coneheads. So you want to hear what people are talking about today in the movies, TV, in the newspaper. What does somebody in your family hear and laugh about on the radio? And can they tell you what they're talking about? So this is for the parents out there and the professionals. How can you help your kid become the boss of his hearing loss? And it's okay if things don't go well. We talk about that guided failure where you can see that they're going to mess up, and it's okay. Let's see what's going to happen and what the consequences are going to be. Sometimes that's the best way for some of us to learn. My dad used to say to me, do you have to do everything the hard way? Actually, I did. For some reason, when I was growing up, that was the best way for me to learn. One of the things we might need help with is that negative scripting or that negative conversation that we get into with ourselves. I'm never going to make it. There's no way I can stand up in front of my class and do a presentation. It's not going to work. Nobody's going to understand me. How can you help frame that in a positive manner? We need a lot of help from our parents and our professionals, because many times we were trying to communicate and tell somebody something and they didn't understand and they didn't get it. And we tried to express ourselves 2 or 3 different ways and it still didn't work. And so finally we just said, forget it, never mind, nobody can understand what I'm saying. How can you help us change and get a little bit more positive and try again? And I'll tell you what, as a grown-up, but even more so as an adolescent, the best part were my friends. Oh my goodness, I like my friends so much more than my mom and dad. And if that's the same with you, if you prefer to be with your friends over your parents, that's okay. And if you've got some tough things coming up, like let's say like an audiology appointment, or maybe you're going in for a cochlear implant mapping, see if you can take a friend with you. I had somebody doing a cochlear implant mapping at work at Colorado, and the gal brought in 5 of her girlfriends for the appointment. That's too many, because they were all talking. They were all talking. But she was so funny. She was like, yeah, I'm doing great. Yeah, my cochlear implant's working well. And so we started asking about, how about in the cafeteria? Yeah, no problem. How about when you're walking down the hall? Oh, it's good, good. I don't need anything. Don't make any changes. Don't touch anything. Don't make any mapping changes. And the girlfriends were so funny. They were like, girl, you never hear anything we're saying in the cafeteria. We were trying to talk to you and you didn't even look at us. And all of a sudden we were able to learn a lot in that appointment. And it turned out to be so much fun. We ended up laughing and laughing for 2 hours. It was one of the best cochlear implant mapping appointments we ever had. But 5 girlfriends is way too many. But ask your mom and dad if you could bring in another friend and have them be a part of your appointment. I love the bottom part. This has been really an important thing for me, and it took a long time for me to learn this. When I was growing up, I worked so hard to be a hearing person, and if I could just do everything really, really well, I would be this great hearing person. But you know what? I have a severe to profound hearing loss. I'm never going to be a hearing person. And finally, I realized what I needed to do was just be the best person that I could possibly be. And that's what we want you to do. You don't have to worry about being the best deaf person. That's a great thing. Or the best hard of hearing person. Or the best hearing person. Just be a good person. And use your sense of humor to help you get through things. We've had a lot in my family where things have just gone wrong. They haven't gone very well because I didn't understand something. In fact, one time, my husband, who's a very, very nice man, he's a special ed teacher, and he also works as a director of a school for boys that have behavior problems. He's a really good man. I've been with him a long time. But he told me he was going to the store to get propane. We needed more propane for the gas grill. I thought he said he was going to get cocaine. He would never go to the store to get cocaine. And I told him, and he could tell by my face that something was wrong, that I had heard something very, very wrong. And he said, Stephanie, what did you think I said? And I said, I thought you said something about cocaine, that you were going to the store to get cocaine. And he says, Stephanie, you cannot buy cocaine at the grocery store. A very good point. We laugh about that to this day. We still laugh when we're going to grill hamburgers, and he'll say, I better make sure we have enough cocaine out there for the grill. And I had to put that picture up because I told you I always want for Christmas one nice family photo. And if you look at that, I'm the only one that's standing there smiling and everybody else is goofing around. They won't do it. They won't do it. But you know what? That actually means so much to me because in my family and in yours, a lot of what's going to get us through the next few years is being able to laugh. And safety is very important. We're going to have to wrap this up. But I think as parents, you can take a look at this. Kids, we need you to figure out how you can stand tall, how you can walk with confidence, and keep yourself safe. I'll talk just for a few minutes about the first one. No is a gift. It is a gift to you. Now, if your mom says you need to go in and start your homework and you say, no, that's not good, that's not what we're talking about. But in terms of keeping yourself safe, being able to say to your friends or being able to say to someone to communicate to them, nope. And I talked about that a little bit earlier. Very important when you become a young adult and an adult, as you go off to school or whatever you're going to do, you have to be able to take care of yourself. And for parents out there, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go. But it's so much fun. And sometimes for you as kids, it's really hard to leave people that you're comfortable with and go and talk to some new people and go and meet some other people. But it's really fun if you let go and give yourself a chance. And we're going to take a few minutes and bring our panel members up and ask a few questions, and then you'll get a chance to ask questions too.
As we have our panelists come up, I just wanted to mention something because one of the parents asked me a question. You know, last October at our family information session, we inaugurated the loop in Wright Auditorium. So this space is looped. If any of you guys who are using technology want to turn to telecoil, you will be able to hear better. Thank you, Stephanie. We're looking forward to the panel.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have some incredible people up here for you to meet and ask questions. And I'm going to go ahead and have them start out by telling you a little bit about themselves. They'll give you their first name and maybe a little bit about your hearing loss, a little bit about school and what you like to do, and then we'll go from there. So Michael, do you want to go first?
Okay, sure. Hi, my name is Michael. Is it working? Okay. Hi, my name is Michael. I'm completely deaf. I'm a senior, and I'll be graduating this year. Would you like to hear more, or is that good for now?
What about your family?
Sure. I am the only deaf person in my family. They all can hear. I also have a cochlear implant. And I use sign language, American Sign Language.
Thank you. Okay.
My name is Catherine. I'm a junior in high school. I have a unilateral hearing loss, so my right ear is completely deaf. And we found this out when I was 5 years old. My dad is actually an ear, nose, and throat doctor, but he did not pick up on this until I was 5 years old. And I was actually at my grandmother's house using the phone, and it was on my right ear. I couldn't hear anything, but she would switch it to the left ear, and then I could hear. So that's how we found out. I'm a junior in high school. I love to dance. That's what I do outside of school. And yeah. Okay.
Hi, my name is Claire, and I'm in 8th grade. And I have mild to moderate hearing loss in both of my ears. And I've been wearing hearing loss since, well, I've not been wearing hearing loss. I've been wearing hearing aids since I was like 10 months old-ish. And yeah.
All right, hey everyone, I'm Joshua, and I am a sophomore in high school. I have a profound hearing loss, bilateral on both sides. Had my left implant since I was 3 and my right implant since I was 12. And if you guys are all wondering about my height, I am 6'10", so at 16 years old, so.
Hi guys, I'm Mariba. I'm a junior and I have two brothers. One of them is hard of hearing just like me, and we found out I was hard of hearing when I was like 2 years old in Pakistan, so we moved from there to here to get better treatment. So yeah.
Okay, and some of you kind of mentioned a few things, but I was wondering if you could share what you like to do for fun.
For fun?
Anybody want?
I can start. I enjoy so many things, so many different sports, video games, all sorts of different games, socializing with, hanging out with friends, hanging out with my guy friends, yeah. Yeah.
So, like I said, what I do for fun primarily is dance. I do ballet and jazz and modern, and that's really what I love to do. I also love going camping with my family and hiking and outdoor stuff like that, hanging out with my friends, all sorts of things.
I also do dance, and I also play volleyball for my school.
All right, so I like to watch a lot of movies, watch TV shows. I like to play video games, and I do a lot of basketball, like very consistently, almost every day of the week. So I'm a very active person in my life, and it's just like what I like to do, just be active and go out there and have fun, just explore what's out there.
I love being around my family, my friends, so I hang out with them a lot. Yeah.
Great, great. So is there anything that was difficult for you when you were a kid or growing up now as a young person because of your hearing loss? Is there anything that you can remember that was just tough or not, or anything that you did not like about being deaf, hard of hearing? Somebody want to go first? Joshua?
So as I mentioned before, I love watching TV shows and movies, but as you know, sometimes watching those shows are kind of hard to hear some dialogue that some people have as for accents or something like that. I highly recommend using closed captioning or subtitles because those are just amazing. They just really help with everything. You can hear even the slightest of whispers that they got in the background, so it's one of my favorite things I've loved to do, and that was one of the hardest things for me to figure out when I was younger. It was just to find out that there was closed captioning. If you go to like AMC theaters in Woodinville, you can go up to the information desk and they'll let you you can ask for a closed captioning glasses where they'll have like a laser beam on the bottom of the glasses that will put out the subtitles right below you, and that's just amazing. I love it. It helps me, and I currently have problem with those until now where I can see everything and read it all off. So I gotta say, if that was one of my problems, that was easily resolved right by the way.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, the captioning piece, I have worn those glasses too, really like the way that they caption, you know, you can, right in front of you, you can see everything. And the rear window captioning is similar to that, same concept. You know, I can't hear and understand movies, certainly, but if people are signing, I can understand, and I can also read captions, of course, and I've used that my whole life. One not so great thing about being deaf is in school, I will take some classes, and sometimes the teacher will talk and make notes, and I wonder sometimes if I'm understanding the notes and understanding the interpreter correctly. Sometimes there's a conflict between those two things. It's hard to take notes, certainly, at the same time while you're watching an interpreter. So now I just focus on the interpreter, and then I get the notes from the teacher, and things seem to work out better. But that is not such a great thing about not being able to hear for myself. So it's nice to have the accommodations and those adaptations that are made for me during classes. I feel that's very important.
One of the main challenges of having a unilateral hearing loss is that I can't tell where sounds are coming from. So, for example, someone will yell my name and I'll spend a solid 30 seconds turning around myself trying to figure out where that person is coming from. And that was one of my fears when I recently got my license, and I'm always scared that there's gonna be an ambulance coming up around me and I'm not gonna know where it's coming from. I'm not gonna know which side of the road to pull off on. So in that situation, I really have to depend on the cars around me and see how they're reacting and where they're going, and I just have to react in that way. But there are definitely times in our lives where we're going to hear something, and depending on where it's coming from, you have to have a split-second reaction, but I don't have that capability. So that's something that's definitely been a challenge, and really it's all about making sure that the people around you know and understand your hearing loss. The people that you're around often understand, because otherwise if they call my name and I don't respond, they may think I'm ignoring them, and I'm never ignoring them, and it's just how it is. So that's just one of the facts of having a unilateral hearing loss, which can be challenging.
And I'm going to add, Catherine, I have a friend who's probably in her late 70s, and when she was 15, 16 years old, because she was deaf, she was not allowed to learn to drive. But her dad, and that was way back in the old days, we don't do that anymore, thank goodness, but her dad took her out and taught her to drive, and of course she's a wonderful driver. But the other thing that changed way back in those old days is that insurance companies started doing some research and studies and found out that deaf people are actually better drivers than hearing people because they're very visual. And I think you'll be surprised at how visual you will be in the car and how aware you will be with what's going on around you. Now, there's one little thing that changed for some of the deaf people, and I have friends that are guilty of this. Does anybody want to guess what it is? Why we might not be doing as well driving as we used to be? Yes, because of
That's
texting.
right.
Yes. Yes, so just like the whole rest of the population, not because of your hearing loss or because you're deaf, but because kids are so busy texting that you're not aware of what's going on. So anyways, I think in most states now it's against the law, of course, to be driving and texting, but I think you'll do well. Okay.
So one of the issues that I've noticed recently is if I'm at a sleepover with my friends and, I'm kind of tired and I'm like ready to wind down, I will take out my hearing aids, and it's pretty much over. Like, I can't hear them, what they're saying, and then I'll just kind of drift off to sleep, and they'll stay up for like 2-3 more hours, and then I miss everything. And I used to play soccer, and if the coach is yelling like where or there, I will think that they're saying Claire, and so I will turn to them and ask, what they're saying, and they're like, I didn't say anything relating to you. So that's been a bit of an issue, but I've sorted it out.
Just if I could speak to that, just add a little bit. I have also played sports too, specifically soccer growing up. And I was on the select team as well. And my dad would interpret for me during those games. And he signs in signed exact English, C signing. And my mom is more of an ASL signer and is fluent in that. But dad would interpret for me, and we would be on the field. And I would look over at my dad, and he would be next to the coach, and I'd look to see what the coach is saying. And it's kind of one good thing about being deaf, because you can really see what the coach is saying from far away. So anyway, the coach wanted me to be in a certain place, and so I would run to a certain place, and he would motion for that, and I would, just have to look back and forth. So that wasn't always a great thing, but, I wish it was a deaf team. Communication would have been so much easier, but all of my teammates could hear, and so sometimes I didn't really get to know them, didn't really have that bond. And with the teammate, with your team, you should feel that bond. So I always felt a little bit like I was an outsider, and that was definitely part of my deafness, the downside for sure. The deaf school does have a sports teams that are all deaf, and I can imagine that would be much better and would have been a great experience.
To add on that also, on the sports I would say that when I'm playing basketball, it's hard to hear the coach on the sideline calling out the plays for certain things, like saying, hey, we're doing a 2-3 defense or something like that. So what I did was, along with my friends, we worked a hand motion symbols for the game, so that while the game's running, we can have an easy way to communicate, which one of the plays that we would do is horns, where we would go like this, as saying like, hey, this is horns, or we would do something like UCLA, which would be like this, or even like 2-3 zones, which would be 2-3. So it's just simple like hand symbols on the way, so that when I'm running down the court, I can just visually look at everyone's hand, find out how that works out. It easily just spreads the message even better to the team, because when you communicate it, it's actually kind of harder when you have the whistles and the squeaking of the feet across the floor. It actually helps everyone communicate better even through that. So I've learned that that helps out very well, not just for you, but for the entire team.
My favorite word used to be "what" all the time, and because I always ask my friends to repeat and repeat every time I miss something. But with new hearing aid I got, I understand them so much for the first time ever, so I don't really have to say "what" all the time. So I think that was the worst, like, most challenging for me.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Saying "what" all
And
the
I
time.
think one of the things that really helps me, and I had to train my family to do this, and I also tell other parents this is very helpful for your kids, but when you repeat something, when we say "what," and you repeat it exactly the same way that you did the first time, because I might have heard the beginning and the middle, but I missed the end. So I'm not going to listen to the beginning and the middle. I'm listening to the end. If you change it, it throws me for a loop. So repeat it again the same way, and then that third or fourth time, because sometimes it takes that many, but then that fourth time, then rephrase it or change it, because sometimes it might be that one word that you just can't seem to get, and maybe another word will work. So that's really helpful.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was thinking of one thing. One not so great thing about being deaf, a downside of that is, travel. And we go traveling every summer, and my parents take us to all sorts of different countries. And, we go across country sometimes, Massachusetts, every year. And I've started flying when I was 12. And I was a little bit, out of sorts about how to do that. So my mom would sit with me, and she would write down things for me on in a notebook. And everything that, I would need to be saying to a person, or everything that was said, any questions that I wanted to say were already written out and ready to go. But the problem is that sometimes we would land at the gate, and they would change the gate numbers. So, didn't seem to be a big problem at that time, but it was a possible downside that could occur. And then if I needed to talk with folks, I could just point to the notebook and have my questions ready, already written out, notes, instead of having to rely upon any kind of auditory input. And one really good thing about being deaf on the airplane is that if there's a baby crying in the plane, I can sleep soundly through that, turn my cochlear implant off, and have just a joyful ride, really.
And that happens a lot with the gate. When you're getting ready to fly, they change the gate number. And so when I get there, I always try to get there early and sit down, and I watch all the people that are sitting around me, and if they all start to move, I start moving with them, hoping that we're all going to the same place. And then I'll always ask somebody at the desk there, at the help desk, what's happened with the gate. But what's interesting with the airline industry now is that there isn't somebody at the gate until just a few minutes before you fly. So you really need to pay attention to that. I'll go and I'll double check the big board where they tell you what gate they're at. But there's really some interesting situations that we're always trying to figure out how to switch or adapt. So good, that was a good reminder to all of us. So we talked about some of those tough moments. Is there anything that where your hearing has been kind of fun or singing or anything where it was, a good story or anything you want to share?
All right, so this goes out for all you guys that are deaf. Okay, we all can agree that sleeping is the easiest thing out there, because then we can ignore all the storms and all that, get a good night's sleep, while the parents have to deal with all that and have to stay up halfway through the night. So I gotta say, that's one of the best things about being deaf, is that you get the advantage of having the perfect night's sleep.
Yep.
That's so true. I actually have a specific story about that. My neighbor, he's a teenage guy, and he would often stay up late playing basketball, and my room was right next to his basketball court, and my sister's room was right next to mine, so she would be up all night, so annoyed, and I would just roll over and put my deaf ear up, and I would be like, what? I didn't hear anything. It was great.
That's great. Oh, I've got one. So my mom told me a long time ago, I was surprised to hear this, but apparently I guess I was brought to like a music concert or something, really, really loud concert. And I fell asleep. I fell asleep through the entire show. I didn't even know it. You know, we got to the show and, you know, I guess, I don't know, I must have been tired or something, but I think it was pretty funny. My mom told me that I slept through the whole thing, just completely deaf. I had no idea.
So one of the things that I have noticed is that I've gotten pretty good at lip reading, even though I can hear everything that people are saying. I've noticed that I've just done that, and so watching cartoons is kind of an issue, because like the words don't match what the person is actually doing with their mouth. And then my friends sometimes, if I mention like lip reading, they'll just say stuff like without talking, and they'll be like, "Did you get that? Like, can you hear it?" And they say the weirdest things. Like one of the first things that my friends always say when they're testing me is, "I love pancakes," which doesn't make any sense because pancakes. And every single time they will do that, and they're always like, "Wow, you can, you know, lip read." And I'm like, "Yeah, you say the same thing every time. It's not that hard."
Trying to think. Okay, so my family don't know sign language. It's just me and my older brother who is also hard of hearing. And we both know sign language, so we just like communicate signing, and my parents don't know anything what we're saying, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Very good.
Yeah.
What is there anything that you would like parents to know about being deaf and hard of hearing? And not just your parents, but like some of the families that just find out that their little ones have hearing loss, just have a hard time trying to figure that out and understand what that's going to be like for their child. Is there anything that you could tell them, or any good advice that you have?
Okay, when you go to the airport, you know those like airport scanners that are kind of like a door frame? Make sure you do not go in there as you have an implant, because I was a very young kid, and one time I went right through, the alarm goes off, I freaked out, I went back in, it went off again, I went in again, and it's just again and again and again. Just because it was going off like crazy, and so I would just recommend you that either not to go through the doorway once, but once at the SeaTac airport actually has this big round machine. I don't know if it's open for all cochlear implants or hearing aids, but it's you can definitely take it and ask them to find out if yours works for it, and if not, you can always ask for a pat down, because you have to get through one way or another. But just don't go through that doorway. It's just not going to work.
And that,
Right.
I don't know, that might have changed a little bit, and that would be a good question to find out if it's maybe different company devices. But I have flown like all over the world, I mean, really, and I've never had a problem. But for safety, I do tend to take it off because I don't want to take the chance of losing my maps, but nothing's beeped. And the new ones now, where you go in and get scanned, done and out in a minute, and I don't have to take anything off. But it might be good to find out later what the best recommendations are from some of our audiologists or people in here. But ooh, that would be scary though. So anybody else with good advice for families?
Sorry. I feel like the main thing that it's important to know is, like, either as a parent or as a child with a hearing loss, is that your hearing loss does not need to define you. You have so many other amazing characteristics and, you know, personality traits and things that you love to do, like, and that's really what's important. And your hearing loss is just one little part that makes up the whole you. So just hearing that from my family and my friends and everyone in my life is definitely something that has helped me over the years, just knowing that my hearing loss is not everything about me.
Yeah. Yep, you're right. You know, I want to say to parents, if you have a child, you find out that your infant is deaf, I mean, of course you're going to worry about their future, but there are tons of resources out there. So, you know, just find out what's available and take advantage of everything that you possibly can, because there's just so much there for us now. For people who are deaf and blind, there are They use tactile interpreting now. There's captioning, there's technology, any type of disability. We have so many options, and whatever you choose, whether you use a hearing aid or cochlear implant or whatever, just know that there's a lot there. And of course, the choice is yours and for your child, but know that, you know, your kid can do anything. They can major in English, they can be a math major, you know, as long as they have access to language, that's the most important thing.
Anybody else with good advice? Or?
All right, also on sports, if you guys have cochlear implants and you got the magnet stuck to your head, it's always a pain to put them back on whenever you jump up and down or run across the court. I do recommend wearing a headband. That always works.
And I also recommend with hearing aids or cochlear implants, if you use that technology when you go to your audiologist, to take your bike helmet or your snowboarding helmet or whatever. If you're having trouble with that, think about how your audiologist or the professionals in your life can help you outside of the booth, outside of the appointment, because that's what they really care about. But I think we get so busy trying to figure out how to make it at home, make it work, that sometimes those professionals might have good input. Claire?
I think that you already mentioned this in your presentation, but if you aren't getting something in class or you aren't hearing the teacher, like you're sitting too far back in the room, don't be afraid to ask, because they're going to help you. They're not just gonna make you lose all that information. They're going to help you, and it's gonna benefit you because you're gonna learn to advocate for yourself and figure out what you need, and just don't be afraid to do that because it's really important.
Yeah. It's important for any deaf students to be assertive in class and speak up for what you need, because you don't want to miss out on the information, so you've got to kind of step up and ask for what it is that you need so that you get it. Like, if you're sitting in the back of the class, then there needs to be accommodations so that you're in the right place to hear or to see, if that's the case, so that you can benefit the most, the most you can from your education. So, for example, like I mentioned, I use an interpreter, but I'll have a note taker too. Even in an IEP meeting, you want to be assertive. You should be ready. Students should be participating in their IEP meetings, and you need adult support too, but the adults should be listening to what the student wants and needs and be there to support you so that you can make the most of your education and your future.
Very good. And if you don't know what will help you, because that was hard for me, even when I was in college, I wasn't sure what was out there, then ask. Ask other deaf and hard of hearing people, ask other professionals, and tell them, that something's not working. What else can help? What else can I do? And, go online and maybe read some blogs from some deaf and hard of hearing people, and they might have some really good ideas that you've never thought of. This is a tough one. Parents worry a lot about their kids, as you know. And once parents find out that their child is deaf and hard of hearing, they worry a lot about what's going to happen when you get teased. Do you have any advice for that? Is there anything that, have you been teased? Is there something that you did that changed that? Or do you something that you wish teachers or schools would know? Anything with the teasing or bullying? And that's a tough one. So if you can't think of anything, maybe later somebody else will have something for us. Micah?
Well, yeah, I can comment to that. With bullying, at school, there's a lot of deaf kids at my school. Well, all the way through from preschool to high school. So there's a lot of deaf kids there. But, in high school, I have done some regular classes, and, all the deaf kids are at that school, and all the hearing kids do know about it already because we're all there. But there are a lot of deaf kids, and so we've been exposed to hearing people, and then the hearing people are also, they know about deaf people. So we don't have to worry so much about being teased about our hearing aids or that we can't hear. And, we just have taught them that they need to be patient, and they know that it's hard, and sometimes they get impatient that we can't hear them and we can't understand, but it's important for them to be patient. I think that's the key.
I don't really have any personal experience with being bullied. The only thing that can be annoying is when I first tell people that I have a unilateral or hearing loss, and they'll pretty much dependably immediately go up to my right ear and start whispering things in my ear and be like, "Oh, can you hear that? Oh, what am I saying?" Like, and I'm like, yes, I can hear you. Like, that's how it is. Like, this ear still compensates. So that's a little bit annoying. But in terms of bullying, I think the important thing to realize is that you are not the problem. It's their problem for being ignorant and for being that audacious to go bully you about just something that is a fact about you, and it's just how you're growing up, and it's just something that you have to deal with. So really try to remove yourself from the situation and almost be like, if I cared about what that person thought, I might be a little insulted, but I don't. So it's fine. I'm just gonna go on living my life. So I think that's really the most important thing, is to realize that it's not your problem.
My school is, it's very small. There's only like 37 kids in my class, and as a whole grade. And so I've gone to school with these kids since I was in kindergarten, and since it's very tight-knit, and I've never had like a real issue with like my hearing loss and stuff, they've never really commented on it. But if you're having an issue, then just remove yourself, because they're not worth it if they're just going to be teasing you about something that's not your fault.
So I want to say that it's not just a disability, it's an opportunity and advantage of being deaf, because I would say that on the topic on bullying, I would just say that just ignore them completely, because if you were to ignore them, the more you interact with them, the more you react towards them, the more they're going to try pushing it onto you. If you ignore them, they don't have anything to do to you, so at all. So just ignore it, just go towards your friends, go find your friends, hang out with them, be happy with them, because they want to care about you, they want to be with you. Just try to completely ignore those people that are trying to be complete jerks to you, because after all, if you give them more action and more interaction with them, they're going to be the ones that are be like, I'm going to take advantage of that and continue on top of that. So just completely ignore them, leave them, make them look like the fools, because if they are trying to attack you and you're not responding, that makes them look stupid.
Mm-hmm. Be proud of yourself. Don't stand up for yourself and just be proud.
Very good, very good. And let's see, do you have anything that somebody's done for you, or said, or supported, or helped you with that was really great, that you want to share? And then we'll open this up and have everybody ask questions. But anything that somebody said or did that just like, wow, that's good, that's what I needed to know.
So my hearing aid was broken because there was just an issue with how it was working. And in one of the classes, I was kind of sitting so that the teacher was closest to the ear that I didn't have my hearing aid in. And one of my friends took notes, and then she made a copy for me. And even though I could hear the teacher, it was just really nice to know that she was thinking of me, and that she was, willing to go that extra step and copy it and take really good notes, because it felt good.
I would recommend that if you have batteries for your implant or hearing aids, I would either put them in your wallet or on your car keys, because then wherever you are, you always have them ready to go in case if it just randomly sporadically happens in class. So you're like, okay, I'm going to pull out my wallet, I'll be good to go, or okay, I'll just take it off my keychain and then I'm ready to go. Just have it somewhere where you always have it. If you don't have either of those, you can always put it in your backpack for school. I've always had a pouch in my backpack, put it in there and just be ready for it. Or if I'm going on a plane somewhere, I would always put it in my backpack on there, just because I always like to take one around for just extra emergency procedures and things like that, carrying my processor on my back just to make sure if we just end up not having power at the hotel for a few days, I got it all ready to go, just right there for me to use right away. So I would recommend just making sure that you bring a spare battery anywhere you go, not just one, multiple.
think, yeah, similar to Claire, one of the best things that someone ever did for me was actually a friend I had in 8th grade who, she wasn't even one of my closest friends, but she did know that I had a unilateral hearing loss, and she understood that I always wanted to be on her right side whenever we were walking next to each other so that I could hear her. And it got to the point where she started correcting before I even realized it, she would switch sides with me. And that was just so special to know that she was tracking it and she understood what I needed. And so just having that support, I think, is really special. And what I was saying before, too, having all my friends and family telling me that this hearing loss doesn't have to define you, I think that's really the best thing that you can say to someone who is hearing impaired or deaf or whatever they call themselves.
And there are those people out there, like your friend, that they just get it. For some reason, there are people that really understand, and those are the people I think you'll find yourself connecting with and developing friendships with, and you want to hang out and be with those people. And the other people that have not been kind and teased and bullied are the ones that we don't want to be with. That's just not a good fit. But I think that's incredible. I actually met my husband taking notes in class. And so I always say I married my note taker. But there was one problem was he took awful notes. He drew little pictures. So then that's kind of how we got to know each other. Then we started talking about the notes, and he had symbols for certain things. And later on, I did find other people that were better note takers. And that is a good thing for note taking as you grow up. If you don't have somebody in the school that is taking notes for you, and it is going to be classmates, that you have 2 or 3 different people take notes, because people take notes on different things that are important. And somebody was going to say, oh, Michael, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to that. I think it's important for deaf children to have a role model. I think it's really important for them to have someone to look up to, just to know that they can, and that deaf people can do things. Just a deaf role model, someone to realize that they can do that and that they can, kind of follow their advice. And like, for example, there was a deaf actor named Howie Seago, and he's a good friend, nice guy. And we were talking, and, he's just a cool guy. And, I really have looked up to him, and, I realized that, I could do it. And I think that kids can look up to him. He had a family, he had all of that, a wife and children, and I realized I could do that too.
And that's Josh.
Yeah. So I also would like to add on to that too. There are also many deaf sports players too. On the Seahawks, there is actually number 40, Derek Coleman, one of the coolest guy out there. He's on the Seahawks too. Went to the Super Bowl champion last year with them, and I love to follow him. He's a great guy. He does a lot of things for the deaf community, and I just feel like he's a great role model, because I want to pursue into go into college sports and stuff. But the only way is to remember what he said, that never give up. Just use it to your advantage. So I was just saying that if you guys don't know who he is, I would look him up, because he's a great guy. He's a great role model.
Very good. That's a great way to open up the questions in the audience. And when you ask a question, we are going to need you to do that in a microphone. Is that correct? Yes, so you'll need to, is that right? Yes, so you'll need to wait for the microphone. And somebody ready to go first? Okay, you can go first, yes.
I have a question for Michael. So since you're a senior, are you involved with your ASD activities, and how did that work for your life?
Stephanie, can you repeat the question so we don't have
Okay, wait, no microphone? We're good? Say it again. Okay. We don't. Okay, so I will repeat the question again. All right. Okay, will you say the question again for me, and then I'll repeat it? I'm sorry. This is how it works. This is life. Just do whatever you do it all. Yeah.
Michael, I would like it if I would like to know how you were involved with the ASB activities, like prom or homecoming, that stuff, and how is that working out for you?
Okay, wait 1 second. So her question is, how is Michael involved with the AS? The school, okay, the school activities, and how did that work? Thank you. And I'm sorry, one more thing. So the reason why I have to repeat it back is because we don't have a microphone for all of you, so we'll work together on that. Thank you. Okay.
So I'm not really involved in the ASB board. I'm involved in different activities. Like, for example, I'm involved in sports, and I'm the only deaf person who's in the team that I'm on. But I have an interpreter with me on the team, and I have to request the interpreter. Like, for example, I did tennis growing up and all the way through, and so I had to request an interpreter for that, every year. And so that was really good, and I've been doing that. And I requested an interpreter for soccer. I think, it's in the fall. Yeah, that's in the fall. Tennis is in the spring. Soccer. So I had to ask again for an interpreter, and I got one, which is great. And so I've been involved in different activities like robotics, as I mentioned, and FRC robotics. I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and I've had to request an interpreter, and my school's provided that, which has been really nice. They've had one ready for me, and I can choose which one I want, which is really nice, and they'll provide that. So I do have to make that request. So make sure to advocate for yourself if you need an interpreter. And you could be involved in the ASB board. You could. One time I went to a meeting. It was for prom. And so I was involved and just heard, some of the announcements. And I, had said, it's important to request an interpreter to make sure, because I have a couple of deaf friends. And so we all agreed that we were going to have the same interpreter and have that ready. So that was nice for that meeting.
Okay. Another question? Yes.
And can you copy this? So what age can you have a cochlear implant?
I think that you can actually have a cochlear implant at any age. It runs the gamut. My suggestion would be that for children that are deaf, that they have a choice, understanding that if you give them a cochlear implant for life, they might really appreciate that. Some do. But if it's their decision, they might be more motivated. But lots of implants are happening for kids that are babies, certainly. Some parents decide to wait until a child is older, and then they can make that decision. But lots of people are excited about the implants. So it depends what kind of communication access you want for your child in their future. With an implant, that doesn't always work for everyone. So again, the choice is yours on deciding what age you would like to implant the child, or the child decides for themselves.
So there's a follow-up question to that. So what happens if you're turned down? Like, if your brain is already developed and then you don't get an implant until later, isn't it kind of too late? Because doctors will sometimes say, no, sorry, you're too old for one, it's too late to get one because your brain is developed in a different way by that time.
And that is a great question for like our audiologist or ENT. So would Dr. C or Dr. Norton, would you like to answer that question for us?
Well, that's a very medical question, and it's different for different people depending on their hearing loss and how long they've had it. So the best thing is to talk to your audiologist and your doctors about that question.
Okay, and I was going to add, if you're wondering about a cochlear implant, the best thing is to set up an appointment and do a consult, a meeting, and find out about it. Because I said for myself many, many years, nope, not going to get a cochlear implant. Nope, not interested. No, thank you, no, thank you. And then I was just thinking about it, and I don't know why, but I had heard so many different things that it was time to go and get an appointment and talk about a cochlear implant for me, not for parents or people in my family or friends or anybody out there, but just to have that conversation. So that's like the best place to start, because if you do something like that, that doesn't mean you have to get one. What it means is you just learn more about it. So good question. Anybody else with a question? We have great people. Okay, and we do have a microphone.
And I was wondering, did anyone else on the panel want to say something to that? to the cochlear implant question.
Did you want to add? Did anybody want to add anything? No. Okay. All right.
Okay.
My question is, can you hear me? Okay. What grade did you ask for a note taker, and when did you find that useful to you?
Anybody?
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So I started having to ask for a note taker when I was during my high school years. So when I started high school, probably my freshman year. So I knew that I should have asked, but to be honest, I never did. And I think it depended on the class too and how it was going. And sometimes there's a lot of lectures, so you need to rely on those note takers. But some of them, you don't really need note taking. It really just depends on the class and the environment, if it's a regular mainstream class or not. Yeah. Anyone else?
I've had a note taker in 7th grade, so yeah.
Next.
I'll actually say something. So before, we were talking about cochlear implants, and I just thought about myself. So when I got my cochlear implant, I was 4. And the reason why is because I didn't know really what was available, and my parents had been talking about stuff, and so I decided to get a cochlear implant, but I wasn't really...
My parents decided to get a cochlear implant. I didn't really understand what it was until much later. And then, of course, having it, I was trained with it. A lot of training. I want to let you know about that. Right now, I have to say that my cochlear implant doesn't really benefit me in terms of hearing things. We're all different. We all hear at different levels. I think the important piece is if you're profoundly deaf and another person is profoundly deaf, you need to develop not only hearing skills or listening skills, it's really you need language. And I think the most important thing is whether or not you have a child that's going to be implanted or not, or you decide to go ahead with that or not, you need to have language there. I think that you need to listen to your children as well.
Okay, thank you. We have a question up there. So our interpreter is here. Yep.
Yes. I want to know, if you are raised in a hearing family, as a deaf person, like I communicate in sign, but my family doesn't. So I'd like to know what you recommend.
Okay, well, I recommend you can ask your parents if, if you want them to sign, just kind of plead and beg and ask them to take a class. And, they're out there. A lot of high schools offer classes after school hours, and there's a lot of stuff out there. So, your parents could go and take a class, or, you could go together and learn and just be able to figure out so that they can communicate with, their children and with you. And, so you can ask your parents, and I mean, it's your right, your life as a deaf person, and it's your native language. So I think it's worth asking your parents to learn sign language.
And I want to add, you're never too old to ask your parents to start signing. Parents sometimes feel like they can't learn, and they can, and what they might need to know is how important it is to you. You might need to say, you know what, I want to share my dreams with you. I want to share my stories with you. Can you learn some signs so we can talk a little bit more in sign language? Parents sometimes don't recognize how important it is. Okay, over there. Okay.
Hi. This is Kai, and I'm going to ask his question for him because he's being a little shy.
Okay.
And we got here late, so I'm sorry if you covered this. He had baseball. He wants to know right now that he plays soccer and baseball, and the coach uses the Roger. But as he gets older and the fields get bigger, he wants to know if you have suggestions for what he should do when he can no longer hear the coach through the Roger, through the FM.
Okay, I don't know if you heard this when I was saying it earlier. What I do on my basketball team is that we like to pass around hand symbols and things like that because when I play basketball, it's hard to hear the coach on the sideline of the court when you got the crowd cheering, you got the team like telling each other things. So what I would do is I would get along with your friends and your coach and tell them some things like, I don't know, if you're going out to the right field or say something like, hey, make an arrow like far right or something like that. But if you're in like soccer or something like that, make like a hand on your, like make a map on your hand that's like, okay, center, that's where I need you to be, or cut off this guy by putting a line there. But in basketball, I would like to do things like, we do a play called horns, and we do this as a hand symbol for saying, hey, we're running horns, or if we're going to run defense, we would say a 2-3 zone. So we would do 2 and a 3. It's just an easy way to spread it without having to say anything. It also kind of gives away the, it doesn't tell the other team what you're doing, so it gives you an easier way of how to communicate, and as well as giving your whole team an idea of what's going on too.
And
I could add to that, to what Josh said. I haven't asked, but just like playing sports with a cochlear implant, I personally, I played soccer without the cochlear implant, and I had to communicate with my teammates prior to the game before it started. So if, you set up a plan ahead of time and just kind of strategize before, and you have that plan, then you can use it through the game. So that's another idea.
And I was going to add, just for fun, you might want to Google Curtis with the C. Curtis Pride, was a former pro baseball player, deaf, and now he's coaching, I think, or maybe he's just retired. But it's really neat to read his perspective on playing baseball as a deaf person and how he was actually really quite talented because he was so visual and watching the field and just very alert and where the ball was and where the players were. It's a good story. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you to the panel for volunteering to come here tonight. I have a question for you. Sometimes family members, brothers and sisters, can get a little mean related to hearing loss and maybe not responding the way that they think you should respond. Do you have any good strategies for dealing with family members when they get mean like that?
I got to think here. Usually, as boys do, like me and my brothers, we love to roughhouse. It's just one of our favorite things to do. Like, we'll mess around with each other and things like that. Honestly, I don't know exactly, but I would like to say that usually I would tell them if they do like to roughhouse, I would just tell them to try to avoid the parts that, for if you have cochlear implants, like to avoid the head parts and things like that, and maybe they do something a little more less intense, maybe play a sport together, play soccer, basketball, or something like that. Try to get them out of the physical mode or whatever, but usually that's my advice. Try to get them to come along and do something that they both like to do together so they can push it out of the negative zone.
And I need to clarify your question. So who's the mean one, the deaf, hard of hearing kid or the brothers and sisters? All of them.
In this case, it's the older sister who is not hearing impaired.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have an older sister. Yeah, she's hearing, and I'm the only deaf one in the family. I'm the middle kid, and so I have an older sister and then a younger brother. So, my younger brother and I, we're pretty close, and he signs a lot better than my sister. And so, we kind of take advantage of that, really. And my sister can sign, but, my brother's a lot better, like I said. So, like for teasing and stuff, like just with sign, and we kind of take advantage of tease my sister using sign, and just communication, like we use slang signs, and so that's kind of cool, and we just use that and tease her, so it's kind of fun.
I don't have any siblings, but if it's an older sister, I feel like girls are sometimes better at just talking about it. So maybe if you sat down with her and told her how it's hurting you, or how it's just not a good environment for you to be in, then maybe she'll listen. If she doesn't, then just try to ignore her, because at that point it's just not worth it anymore.
I have an older brother. He's 16, and when I was little, he was mean sometimes, and he would say words that were not very nice. So sometimes, if that happens, talk to the adult, and that can help solve problems. But sometimes, it can get to the point where it can't be solved.
Thank you. I did a workshop a while ago on siblings, and it was really interesting to hear some of the siblings of kids, brothers and sisters that had hearing loss. And the best story was when the deaf or hard of hearing kid goes to the audiologist or to the speech therapy appointment, and if they did a good job, they went out for ice cream. And then, of course, you know, the first thing that happens when that kid gets home is he tells his brother and sister, guess what? I got to go for ice cream. And the girl that was telling, the woman that was telling this story was like 23 at the time, and she said, I just wanted to go out for ice cream. I never got to go out. And so sometimes it's some of those things, not so much the attention, but even the older kids that look back and you know, that's what they remember is when they didn't get ice cream. So actually the title of that presentation is, you know, something like everybody gets ice cream. But it's kind of a little bit of that attention and where some of that meanness comes out, or maybe not. And I think the fact that you're concerned about it as a parent is it tells me that eventually she'll get there and understand, and she might be one of those adults that has a better understanding of people in our world than some of her peers. We can always hope.
The last time that Stephanie was here, you had mentioned something about when you were a child and you went and got your hearing tested, how stressful it was or how much pressure you felt sometimes. So I was wondering what the panelists thought when they're going in for their hearing testing and what their parents or their audiologists can do to make that better for them.
A little bit of background on that. I just kept thinking that if I tried really, really hard, I would pass. And having a severe to profound hearing loss, the chances of me passing were slim to none. But I was convinced if I could just concentrate really hard, I would pass. Or if I prayed really hard, I would pass. And that just didn't happen. So what I have found is that when our kids go in the sound booth to do the testing or get a mapping, that we're really doing well. We're really doing the best that we can. And to understand that it's not a pass-fail, and it's not about them, it's just their ears and what they're hearing or they're not hearing. And that, that it's so important to acknowledge, you did a good job in there. And, but to make sure that the parents understand that that good job doesn't mean their hearing got better, because sometimes that's what parents are hoping. And as kids, you want to please your parents. But it's just, does that answer your question? Is that what you?
Yeah, I'm curious what the.
And for you guys, do you remember? Yeah.
Yeah, in my experience, well, really, like in the past, I, didn't feel like I had to do it right. I didn't really care. But with the mapping, with the cochlear implant, I was trying to do my best, like Stephanie had said. I was really trying to show what I could hear. And, I would try to hear the low sounds and try really hard and just show them what I could do. And so, I was just trying to find the right, I knew that they were trying to find what was right for me and make it work. But, it was just, it didn't really feel like I was being punished, but it felt like they were trying to find the right fit. So you have to do what's best for you.
So I go in to get my hearing rechecked once a year-ish, depending on when the appointment is. And I always tell myself, just go in and you're just gonna hear stuff. I mean, it's not gonna be that bad. And the minute that I walk into the sound booth, I'm terrified and then when the beeps start playing, and you're not really sure if you heard one, so then I kind of just click the button, and then I'm like, could I hear that last time I was here? And I get really stressed out about it, and nothing ever changes, so just don't worry about it. It's not that bad.
All right, so I have to say, although the sound booths are very helpful to you, it may be a very boring appointment. Sorry, Susan. Yeah, it's definitely
I'll say
worth
yes to that.
go. I mean,
I'll second that.
Updates your program, give you a better hearing and all that. Usually I just like try to grab myself and pull myself through just because it's, after all, it's for the betterment and everything. Sometimes it is get a little bit of, there is some times where it's fun, but I mean, it's like, you just gotta pull through. It's for the betterment of your hearing so you can hear other people well and stuff. And they are really great people. The audiologists up there are really helpful and they'll help you along with everything, so.
Do you have anything about when you went to the audiologist? Oh, Michael?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to say something. Just like right now, I'm a high school student, and just hearing tests, for me, it's like,
I'm out of district. I'm not in the school of my school district. So I'm at a different school outside of my school district. And so they will provide, because of the DHH program, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing program. So I get my hearing test to prove that I'm deaf so that I can be at that school. So I still have to get access, of course, get all of my academic and educational needs met through, a program like that. So I need things that will benefit and support me. So depending upon, my hearing's not going to improve, right? I'm profoundly deaf. So it's just to prove that I am deaf and that I can still qualify for that program and keep going. So that's why I take the test at this point.
I don't get scared going to my appointments because I love seeing my audiologist, Nicole. So it's nice meeting you. Yeah, I like going there. It's fun.
Thank you. That was nice.
One of the things since I have a unilateral hearing loss, I am usually scared going in there that I might have all of a sudden some weird hearing loss in my left ear that then would make, render me deaf in both ears all of a sudden. But the thing is, like, sort of what Claire was saying, like, it's not a test. Like, you may, be like, oh, I think I heard that. Maybe I'll just click the button anyway. And, like, it's still, it's still going to, render accurate results in the end. You're not taking an exam. So don't be worried about getting the right answer for your hearing test because even though it's called a test, there's no such thing as the right answer. So, yeah, it's just a normal doctor's appointment. Just go in there and roll with it.
And it is more about that confidence rather than what you hear or you don't hear. I had a little girl that I was working with who had a progressive hearing loss. So when she went in for her hearing test, you could see that it was getting, harder and harder for her to hear, very difficult for her mom. And that little girl came out every time, I did a good job. And she's like, you did an awesome job. But it was that confidence that carried her, even though she wasn't hearing as well as, what she started out with when she was diagnosed with the hearing loss. So I think we have a few more minutes. Anybody else? Any kids? You guys have any questions? Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. I want to ask the panelists about your experience with discrimination. Has anyone ever discriminated against you because you're a deaf person? And how do you feel about that, or how did you resolve that situation?
Okay, I'll go ahead and talk about that. Honestly, I think it's their problem. It's the educational system's problem. For deaf kids, we're just naturally, people need to be educated. So we're just doing our thing. We're normal. We're doing our thing. And it's their problem that they're not cooperating with us. It's, it's just our ears. I mean, it's a disability, for example, like, it's no weird thing. It's just these ears don't work. But I'm still an active person. I'm still a boy. I'm still smart. I'm still able to do all of these other things. And it's their problem, honestly.
I'm curious to hear from Catherine, because you dance and you can only hear out of one ear. So how do you feel the music, especially with ballet, because oftentimes the music is really soft? And I know that with a band or something, with a bass I can really feel it, but with softer music, I wonder, how do you do it?
That's actually a really good question, and something that honestly I feel like I can't address very well, because I've never really had a problem hearing the music in dance class. I don't know if maybe one of the other people could talk to how your guys' experience hearing music, if you've ever struggled with that, because I've honestly never had a problem hearing the music in my dance class.
Yeah.
I also dance, and my studio is kind of smaller, and in the like Catherine said, I've never really had a huge issue, but I just ask the teacher to turn it up if I can't hear it, or and like I said, my studio is like really small, so it's an empty space because you're dancing, so the music just reverberates everywhere, and yeah, again, it's never really been a problem. But if you're in that situation, just ask them to turn up the volume if you need it.
And I have a friend that's deaf and did competitive ice skating. So her mom would listen to the music and then count the beats out, and she learned to memorize them, and then she would just kind of feel it. But there's a portion in competitive ice skating when you get closer to like semi-professional, semi-pro, where they will surprise you with the music, and you have to go out there and do your skating competition. And they were able to advocate and request permission for her mom to get the music ahead of time, just a few minutes before the actual performance. They would listen to it really as quickly as possible, and just kind of do it like by memorization and what she could feel. She did well. I mean, she didn't become a professional or an Olympic athlete, but she did well.
Yeah, I would say really, I remember my mom had told me that like with dancing, when I was like a young kid, and I would copy my sister, My sister did Irish dancing, and she would do it to the Irish music, and, so I would just kind of like follow my sister, and, she had said, you can't hear the music, but I was watching her and following the movements, and so I could do that visually. And also I could feel the music, if, like you had mentioned, if you have the bass, like with hip hop and stuff like that. So, when it's a little bit more bass and you can feel the rhythm, then you can follow it a little bit easier. So it's nice because you can pick it up visually with that movement, and you can express yourself through music that way.
I was just really curious because I can feel the bass myself and I can hear some of it, but with ballet I was thinking, wow, that's fascinating because the music is so soft and nice, but I can't imagine personally, I can't feel it. So I was just really wondering how someone does that.
It's a great question.
So Kai would like to know if you have any tips for being responsible for your equipment, and also a couple years ago he lost a school district receiver. It just fell off, and he wants to know if you have ever felt guilty for losing a piece of equipment or having equipment damaged. Is that right, buddy?
I'll answer that. So as for sports, I don't always wear both of them just because it's just too much of a loss if I was to break both of them in the sports. So what I would like to do is I would take a box and I would put one of my implants in there and just keep it safe in there and put it in my bag where I have all my other equipment, and so I wouldn't forget it, wouldn't lose it. But other than that, to keep things to be more secure, I would wear like a Huggy, if you will. It's kind of a ear guard for your other implant, and it'll keep it on, and as well as wearing a headband to keep the headpiece on as well, so it keeps all of it in place and things like that. But then there's that rare possibility of it breaking while that happens. But I mean, I'm pretty sure you can talk to your insurance or something like that to help you out with that. But other than that, I would just say try to take all the other aspects of making sure you keep it as safe as possible, make sure it stays on and everything. Just reduce the amount of damage it can possibly have.
I would like to say also every time before I either like go into a pool or a hot tub or I get in the shower, I always double check my ears, and like I've kind of known like how the water sounds when I have my hearing aids in and like how it sounds when I don't have them in. And as far as like keeping them safe and not getting them broken, I have like either I have like a designated pocket in my bag where if I need to take them out, that's where they always go, and just find that place, and they will always be there unless unless something totally random like having it fall out has happened. But just always have a system.
I think that's a really good point. It's just like keys or a phone or something that like you're always gonna need dependably every day, day after day. Like you just need to make sure that you have a pocket in your wallet or something where they're always going to be, or a hook where you're always going to hang your purse, put your whatever your equipment you need there too. Just make sure that you have a routine.
Yeah, I agree. Because the cochlear implants and they're expensive, and so I try to be really careful. And my parents have really gotten on me about that. Making sure I keep it in a safe place and it's in the same place every time, and just knowing where it's at. So. There was one evening when I accidentally, went into the shower, and I just had like this funny, feeling. I can never hear the shower water, and then all of a sudden I realized I had it on, and so, and I thought I got wet, and so, I took it off, but I always take it off when I go swimming or I do sports. I always remember to take it off, but I had just that one time forgotten it, and, I just try to be careful with my cochlear implant, and I heard the sound, and that's what really caught me off guard. So, it was the water, and, you try to keep it dry, and I try to dry it off fast, and because you don't want it to rust and get ruined. So, otherwise you need to get a new one.
It happens.
And, it was yeah.
It happens to all of us at least once. And our final question, you.
I have a question for all of you guys. Is high school pretty tough for you guys? Because you guys have hearing loss, and it must be really pretty tough for you guys. Tough. Okay.
Is it pretty tough for you guys to hear?
High school? Can you repeat the question?
Is high school pretty tough for you guys? Because you guys have hearing loss. I mean,
I'm in 8th grade, so I can't really speak for that.
As a sophomore in high school, I would say that always take advantage of what you have. If you did not hear the question and your teacher won't repeat it during class, always go up to him after class and ask him to repeat it, or maybe after school if it was a math equation you couldn't figure out. Always ask hey, I did not understand what you were trying to say in class. Could you possibly try doing it again? Do it a little more visually or something like that, if that's what you're meant by if it was tough or something like that. But usually the academics thing, it's their job to try helping you understand the situation and things like that. But if they won't answer right away, just always try to use your time after school or after class to have them help you out on that.
I think that one of the most important things is just making sure that you're not approaching it as, oh my gosh, it's high school, it's going to be so tough because I have this additional thing that might drag me down. You just have to make sure that you don't get yourself into that mindset and really advocate for yourself. If you need to be sitting in the front row, I personally always try to position myself on the right side of the classroom so that my good ear is facing towards the teacher. And if you're, find yourself sitting in the back row one day and you can't hear, you're not helping yourself, and that's really the most important thing in the end, is to know how to advocate for yourself and just approach it matter-of-factly. Yep, this is my hearing loss. This is how it is. If you have, I often ask my friends to switch sides with me on a table so that I can then hear them when they're speaking with me. And it's just a fact of your life, and you just gotta go through life and do whatever you need to do that will help you succeed, because that's the most important thing.
Yeah. just wanted to add, if I could, to that, just for myself, because I'm fully deaf. And with school, you know, it's great because I've got my friends and, you know, all of them are deaf and we all sign, we use sign language, and it's just nice. I think you just need to find friends who have something in common with you, who, you know, are deaf, who can provide support to you, because, you know, without friends, it just doesn't work. So you just need to find that support. And I think there's 37 different deaf students in my school, and so I've got a lot of friends and we're all in the same classes and we can support each other if we miss something. And, you know, it's just great to have like a partner, you know, who's also deaf, who can help you out. And sometimes I wish that, because at the School for the Deaf, you know, all the students are deaf and they all use sign and all the teachers even sign. And so that's really nice. And you stay at school, you stay there and you learn for the whole week and then you go back home on the weekend. And sometimes I wish I had that experience, you know. So there are other options for your education, just for your deaf kids. If you want to develop communication and you want to sign, you want to go to the School for the Deaf, that's another option too.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody. It's amazing to see these young adults blossom, and I've known some of these guys since they were really little, and it's amazing to watch kids grow up, regardless of their hearing, right? And so they're an amazingly articulate group of young people, and I appreciate you guys sharing your experiences with all of us. Thank you guys for coming, and please fill out the questionnaires and let us know what you'd like to hear about. And then there's probably a little bit more pizza out in the foyer. So thanks for coming and good night. Enjoy your weekend. And thank you. I have to say thank you to Stephanie for coming from Colorado for this. And thanks to our whole team who makes these events really go very smoothly, and Lisa Herber, who really does it all. Thank you.